If you have any questions, feel free to break in or alternately hold on to them until the end of the presentation and we can deal with them at that point. I'm just going to start the PowerPoint. So here we are, March 27th, and I was looking at at the presentation from last year, and we covered a huge amount of material last year. Tonight, I'm hoping will be a little bit lighter, but a lot of information about things that we are working on and things that are in progress. Oops. This is where we're going through our probably 30 minutes of conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about some things that are happening at Transport, and I can see I can't spell very well. A little bit about Sail Canada. I spent some time at an IE clinic this weekend, and I was asked to have a conversation tonight about lesson planning. So we're going to spend a few minutes on curriculum planning and lesson planning, and really focusing on why it's important and why we should be doing it, and a bit of a policy update. So hopefully 20-25 minutes, and we'll be through this for some questions and conversation. There's been a major change at Sail Canada in the last few weeks. Ryan Kelly is the new CEO. Don Adams has retired. Ryan actually comes from Nova Scotia, comes from Newfoundland via Nova Scotia, and he has been affiliated with Sail Canada both as a manager of Newfoundland sailing, and then working in the marine industry in Nova Scotia and working as a CanSail coach. So he's working hard to get his feet on the ground and understand bits of the business, but at least it's not totally new to him. I've got Jen Manning's name up there as well. She's the director of operations, and for many years we have depended on her as the individual that can answer every question when anyone can't. But hopefully going forward, Sam, Nick, or I can actually deal with any of the issues that you might have. And Jen being director of operations is incredibly busy. So unless the roof is really coming down on your head, one of the three of us is probably a better contact. Sam, Jen, and I are all staff, and of course, the Learn to Cruise subcommittee is the technical support for cruising, and we've had a couple of changes in that in the last, shall I say, the last week or so. Yeah, last week or so. So is when we announced them, but they've been in progress for a while. So John has taken over from Bob Davis in BC. And Dan has taken over from Henry Raffle, who is the rep in the Maritimes. There's some other members that attend the meeting or what we call them observers, but they provide valuable input. So this is the key membership of the panel, but there's a few other people that are closely involved with conversations about decisions we make. In terms of the roles of Sam, Nick, and I, this kind of splits it out. Sam is the manager and responsible for oversight of all the programs. Nick is the detail guy that does all the major piecework at Sail Canada. And then I am the subject matter expert, chair of the Learn to Cruise and Power Committee. And I'm the poor sucker who writes exams and fixes stuff and addresses problems with the materials and textbooks and things like that. So depending on what your issues are, Nick or I are probably the best people to contact with questions or concerns. Now, I talked about a couple of the issues that we have to discuss again from Transport, a couple of these issues last year, and I'm bringing them back because they're not really resolved. So there was, over the last couple of years, some consultations with industry, and the consultations were specific to some organizations about mandatory life jacket wear and the perspectives on that. And there was a questionnaire or an opportunity for people to comment on the Let's Talk Transportation Transport Canada application, where we all have an opportunity to respond to current issues. That consultation is closed. There are a lot of jurisdictions in the states where there are mandatory wear regulations for youth. And because it's the states, there are different regulations from state to state. What's happening in Canada is there's a conversation about the fact that mandatory wear might have a positive impact on reducing drowning. So they're looking at the ages where there are potentially significant risk to youth and at small vessels. The last conversation at CMAQ was that there's going to be another consultation asking for public input, and they've made no decisions about either the approach or whether they're going to move forward on mandatory wear. But I think, given the amount of support that the conversation about mandatory wear got from marine organizations, it's hard to say no to an action which might save lives. I think that it's coming, but I just can't say when. So there's going to be a lot more back and forth about this issue before we know really what transport's going to do with this. The second item is pleasure craft licensing. And for the last, I guess, 2 or 3 years, there's been a conversation about trying to capture the expense of pleasure craft licensing that the federal government is spending, and transferring that cost to the users of the vessels. The conversation started a couple of years ago at charging for the PCLs at $15 a piece, and that conversation has moved to $24. At the Marine Advisory Council meeting in Ottawa last fall, the statement was that they would be taking this change to Canada Gazette, and that the change would be effective in April of this year. But when I looked at the changes that were gazetted and come into effect on April 1st, they all reference registration and not pleasure craft licenses. So there's some changes to the small vessel registration system. But as far as I can see, so far at least, no changes yet to the PCL system. So they're moving from a world where you got a license and it was good forever to a 10-year, and then moving forwards, the plan is a 5-year licensing period with a fee that's going to increase as inflation increases. So it's a bit of an attempt to cover costs which they've absorbed from the taxpayers so far, and I can't tell you when this change will actually come into effect. But I think that without doubt it's going to move forwards, because the government needs to do whatever it can to recover costs from the actual individuals that benefit from whatever product they're using or selling. And the last piece to talk about in terms of transport is engine cutoff switches. And these are the kinds of things we see in small outboards, where we have a cord that goes through a little stop lever, and we attach it to ourselves so that if we fall overboard, the engine stops. These, however, at the moment are purely optional in Canada. Again, in the States, in some areas, they've made them required. And the conversation is whether they should move to make them a requirement in Canada. They've had a conversation about vessel size and vessel type, and there's no statement as yet as to where they will be moving with this. But there is a statement that later this year they're going to publish the regulatory text that they want to move forwards with. And that would be the Canada Gazette Part 1, and then in 2025, Canada Gazette Part 2, and it would come into force in the spring. So we should know about this coming into the fall, going through the winter, whether they're going to do anything in this area and what that might be. The concerns from sailors were often that the cutoff switches will inhibit what they can do in the boat, but there are some available cutoff switches which are essentially remote. You wear one part of it, and another part is attached to your engine. If you were to fall overboard and you immerse, that would automatically cause an engine stop. So it still would be, however, potentially a problem for those with older outboards or an additional equipment requirement. In terms of what we've done in Sail Canada, when I look back at the session from last year, there were a lot of changes to standards that we were talking about that have been implemented. This year, when I looked at the dates on the student and instructor certifications and standards, there have not been a lot of changes. So you can see that there are at the student level minor changes for a few standards, but none of these were significant as far as I recall. And at the instructor level, all of the standards were changed to incorporate the change in recertification. So the only ones that had a real material change in the instructor side was the catamaran standard. And what was added there was a recommended level of experience prior to entering that certification level. Practices and procedures is just seems to be subject to ongoing changes every couple of months. So I'm going to come back to talk about that in a few minutes. One change that we are just in the process of moving forwards is in the coastal nav, the basic coastal nav standard. And we are hearing many reports from various sources about issues with the use of chart plotters and electronic chart systems, whether it be an iPad or a telephone or whatever, for use both in navigation planning and when underway. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that our instructors teaching navigation talk about both the benefits and the risks of the use of electronics on boats, and try and point out some of the mistakes that others have made so that they won't repeat those. So you can see in red here, it's just a small addition to one of the pieces of performance objective 14, the basic coastal nav standard, referencing electronic charts for use for navigation planning. And we will be putting together a note providing nav instructors, and it'll be available both on the navigation resource page, and we'll make it available on the cruising page as well. We're going to put together a note providing some background information on some examples and why this is important to help the conversation in nav classes. With the practices and procedures manual, it's pretty exciting reading to spend your time looking at it and try and figure out what gets changed when you see that the date in the document is different from the last one you read. So what we're planning to do and intending to do is to provide 2 copies of each version of the document, and we'll retain the copies showing updates for probably 2 or 3 update cycles. So one of those will actually show that the text changes in red. It's track changes in words, so they aren't perfectly intelligible because they show what was crossed out and what was replaced, but they do point you to the new areas of wording. And then the other version, of course, would be the final version without the track changes. So I think that will help kind of short circuit and make it possible for people to keep track of the areas that we're changing in this document. There's been a lot of conversation at the IE level about a need for a consultation group or an ability for all of us to have a chance to discuss with each other issues and to communicate. So we're looking at starting an IE consultation group. We do this in Ontario. The IEs get together 6 or 7 times a year in the winter to discuss instructor clinics and other issues that Ontario Sailing has. And it seems to be pretty beneficial in that environment, so we're going to extend it to a national level. In talking about who had received a notice of this meeting at the IE clinic last weekend, it was surprising to find that there were some IEs that hadn't received a notice, I should say. And there is an expectation that our instructors will allow Sail Canada to send them information. It's one of our key ways of communicating about the system and changes to the system. The products that is used for distribution is Constant Contact. And I found out today that if you set your profile up to receive communications from Sail Canada, and then for whatever reason decide that one of those types of communications you no longer want, and you cancel that one piece, that cancels all of your Sail Canada communications. You turn off everything. So we would ask you to go to your profile, make sure you're receiving emails, newsletters, and things like that from Sail Canada. And if there's material you really don't want, there is a simple solution to that. So I don't know that I need to tell you what it might be. With exam updates, we've been focusing on trying to fill the holes for areas where we didn't have exams. So over the last year, we've actually completed the suite of exams for Advanced Nav. The piloting one is still probably under conversation about some of the questions, but at least these exams exist. And 3 of the 4 of them, piloting is pending, but the others have also been translated into French. Last spring and summer, there was a conversation, and we made some changes to the catamaran endorsement to support teaching basic cruise on catamaran. We did modify the basic and intermediate exams a bit at that point, and then late in the year, we had another cycle of modifications. So in December, those 2 exams were updated. Exam updates that are coming, we're working on a basic coastal nav update, adding some questions about things that we've added to the standards, so AIS, electronic charts, and then moving a couple of questions from the intermediate exam to the basic, because the questions are focused on basic nav knowledge. And the tide and current tables, their format has changed a bit over the past few years, so the tables are updated. And many of the questions are changed a little bit, so the answers differ a bit from things in the past. And because we've stolen some questions from intermediate nav, then we will next be going through part A of the intermediate nav exam to make sure that the questions there are appropriately focused. So those are updates that are in progress, but those are not the only areas of activity. We, in the spring, asked for volunteers for people that are interested in becoming involved with the cruising subcommittee. And we had a number of individuals step forward and say they were interested in getting involved and providing some support. So some of these initiatives that are underway are in that area, and they're participating in that. Some of them are things that staff are looking after. So until this year, the logbook was published in 2 official languages, and there were 2 logbooks, and we finally realized that's kind of silly. So we're taking some action, and we've actually got a bilingual logbook almost complete and ready for publication. So at some point, when you order logbooks, or when your school orders logbooks, you'll get a different look in a logbook, roughly the same physical shape and format, but it will be one logbook for both French and English moving forwards. We've had a number of requests over time that we add some things to Checklick, specifically the student prerequisites for each level. So we're going to go ahead and do that in the spring, and have a look at the checkoff items to make sure that they're consistent with the way the standards are defined. The checkoff items were built probably 10 or 12 years ago, I think, initially, and we've made some changes to the standards since then. So it's just really a matter of making sure that those items are consistent with the elements of the standards. Other areas that individuals from this group are looking at notes, student notes, and a rubric for advanced cruising. Material for keelboat spinnakers. So we have a standard, but we have no evaluation materials. There's been some clinics run, some instructor clinics. So there's certainly a bunch of material that we can use to build training support materials and potentially student evaluation materials. But at the moment, there's nothing posted yet on the resources side. In the catamaran world, we do have some student notes in English, but they are somewhat limited. So there's been an individual or two that are interested in extending those. And then a couple of activities from the cruising subcommittee. I guess the 12 years ago, maybe, when the RWA was brought into Canada, we intentionally moved away from the use of the word yachtmaster in our two awards, activity awards for those who complete advanced cruising and then go out and use it, or offshore cruising and go out and use that skill. So we had a Yachtmaster Coastal and a Yachtmaster Offshore award, and we renamed those to Sailing Master. We've decided that we're going to go back to the original names because Sailing Master really does not have the kind of ring and connotation and recognition that the word Yachtmaster does. We're going to be careful and call it the Sail Canada Yacht Masters so that we differentiate it from another vendor who's somewhat protective of that term. There is an instructor award for Instructor of the Year. There's roughly at the moment 300 cruising instructors and over 1,000 dinghy instructors. And in the past 25 years or so, only one cruising instructor has ever been recognized using this award. And the terms for it don't really fit the activity of people who contribute to the cruising system or are working in the cruising training environment. So we're moving forwards, trying to put together an award that's focused on cruising. We've received a blessing from TCAC to do this, but at the end of the day, the board also has to bless us. So we have some work to do before we can say, yes, this award exists, but we are working on that. In the virtual learning area, we are continuing development of the Moodle platform for instructor training. And we're having ongoing conversations with other staff about how else it should be used and how to use it effectively. So I think you can see some more changes there. One of the things that we have not yet done is supported access for instructors who are not enrolled in clinics. And there's a bunch of useful training material and guidance there. So we're going to be looking at finding a way to be able to provide access to that platform, those materials for the entire instructor base. At the moment, we just connect our instructors that are taking clinics to that system. Oh, and those that are recertifying. Last presentation, we talked about the fact that we had submitted a PCOC manual to Transport Canada, and it was under review. Well, they have completed the review, and that PCOC manual is available in English on both Apple Books and Google Play. We need to translate it, and Transport Canada needs to review the translation, but they indicated to us that they would not accept a French version for translation until there were some other significant regulatory changes that were coming. So we're waiting until they indicate they're available to review the document before we go ahead with the translation. And with respect to PCOC card processing, we've had some ongoing issues with the current card processing company, and we've decided it's time to make a change. We've looked at bringing it in-house and decided that may not be the appropriate direction to go. So we have a new provider that looks like they're going to do a better job than our current one. And the new provider also has an existing and approved online training course for PCOC. So when we go to them, there's a big win in the sense that we will also be able to point individuals to Sail Canada online training. For the Sail Canada organization, the huge driver is that much of the revenue from the PCOC card processes and replacement cards. So if we, as we build up the number of cards that we have issued and do more and more card replacements every year, then our revenue starts to creep up. It's not huge amounts, but you know, a few cents every card, a few dollars every card. Our revenue tends to creep up over time. So I think this is a huge win for us. The costs for card processing and card updating are going to change a little bit. And the new costs are shown on the bottom of this page. And I wouldn't tie myself too much to these costs, because one of the changes we know is coming is the Transport Canada group that monitors and administers the PCOC program is going to look for some cost recovery, just as the PCL group did. And we can expect at some point that SAIL Canada will need to be providing them with a little bit of money for each card we issue. So I would expect in the next year or two to see these numbers move again. But that will be a move across the industry, because everybody will be subject to this levy from transport. So it's not going to change our competitive position in terms of pricing at all. You didn't go anywhere. Okay. I guess over the last 10 years, we've asked Transport 4 times for the authorization to issue ICCs. And every time we've asked, we got a different response. We asked last summer again, a fourth time, and we had a supporting letter from Power Squadron. The response we got from the deputy was that SAIL Canada is not a signatory to UNECE Resolution 40, which is the document, the agreement that's the basis for issuing ICCs. And as such, because Canada is not a signatory, they can't grant us the authority. So there is at this point no real reason to pursue with transport and lobby the minister to change that decision, and I don't think they will. So we are going ahead and developing an alternate product, just like most of the other providers in North America. So US Sailing, ASA, CREA, ISPA, NauticEd, all of those organizations who are North American based and not international do not have access to authorization to issue ICCs, so they all have an alternate product, and we are going to go ahead and do the same. We're having conversations about how that will actually work. We have agreement in principle from TCAC, so there's nothing to stop us from going ahead and doing it. But there is clearly some work to do before we're ready for it. So we're expecting a launch late in 2024. And the last piece on this page, the IE clinics, we typically alternate Eastern Canada, Western Canada. So we've just had a clinic in Toronto. The next clinic we expect to have some time in Western Canada in early 2025, pending advertising and a whole bunch of other things. But that's the starting point for the conversation about where the next clinic will be. So I'm putting it up here. If anyone's interested, we would love to have you participate. At the eye clinic, I was asked the question about why do we focus so much our attention on curriculum planning and lesson planning? I promised that I would provide the answer I gave there in this forum as well. So I wanted to speak briefly about curriculum planning and lesson planning and why it's important to instructors. And this may be no new news to many of you, but I can tell you that when we get instructors back for recertification, or when we get instructors stepping up to a new level, this tends to be one of the areas where we see a real weakness. I would not get in my car and plan to drive to Moose Jaw without a map. That would just be madness, because I really don't know where Moose Jaw is. I don't know how I'd get there. I would need to do the same kind of thing to do a good job in delivering a set of knowledge. So a curriculum plan is essentially just the syllabus divide it into a logical presentation sequence and fit into some kind of schedule. Now, we know that in the perfect world, when we're teaching on the water, we would have wind every day and it would be sunny, and the wind would only be 15 knots, maybe 10 to 15, maybe a bit lighter on the first day, but it would make teaching really simple. However, that's not the real world. More likely, on the first day of the class, we have 7 knots and it's late July, early August. On day 2, 3, and 4, we got no wind at all. So we would know from the weather forecast what was likely to happen to us, and we need to be able to adjust to that kind of situation and accommodate our sequence of training and how we manage the material to meet the environment we're working in. So clearly weather is one of the constraints we have no control over, that a curriculum plan would help us give an idea about how to resequence what we're going to cover. And then the class size, how long we have to practice. Do we have 2 students or 5 students? And the characteristics of the students, how we see them learning, may also influence how we structure our days and how we structure presentation and practice of materials. So the curriculum plan is key because it provides the agility and the ability to restructure and change how we're going to present and organize our course and help us get through the material. Did I hear a question there? Nope. Okay, I'm going to go on then. So that's my sales pitch for curriculum planning. Within curriculum planning, then we have a number of lessons which we're going to deliver. And for the years where I taught basic cruising and occasionally intermediate cruising continuously for 3 months in the summer and a bit of additional stuff in spring and fall, I really didn't need lesson plans because I'd done it so often, I could just do it automatically. What I needed lesson plans for, though, in that environment was that by the end of the summer, I was getting pretty stale. And I needed to think about how I could change my game and do things a bit better. For situations where I only teach a course every 2 or 3 years, it's a godsend to be able to pick up a set of lesson plans and use those as a guide to help me get through delivering the material, make sure I both cover it all and cover it in a way that makes sense. A lesson that I spend some time thinking about before I deliver and prepare for is always a better lesson than the one that I do on the fly. So I arrive at a boat and I stand up in front of people and I think about what I'm going to teach and then do it. That's never as successful as a lesson that I've done some planning for. So when we're thinking about lesson planning, the process of planning, although it's painful, we only need to do once, and then we just need to spend some time updating them based on our experience in delivering lessons. The table here is really just a list of the things that we should be thinking about, including in lesson plans. And the first thing that many instructors want to do is just write down the content they're going to deliver and then say, my plan is complete. But that's far from what you need in terms of a lesson plan. How you're going to deliver the material, how you actually prepare for it, how you engage the students, how you evaluate what you accomplished, what they've absorbed, is just as important as the actual content. So I think all of these components are important. We saw a couple of sample plans on the weekend where the print was so small that you really couldn't read it without a magnifying glass. So a plan should be something that you can refer to while you're teaching. And that kind of plan was pretty useless because you just couldn't see it. So you couldn't get those reminders about what's next. How should I approach this component of the topic? Those things were just invisible with that kind of plan. So before the lesson, have a look at your plan. You might think again about what you're doing. If you don't have a plan for the lesson, create one, and spend some time thinking about what you've documented and whether you want to continue to approach the lesson in that way. And the plan will remind you how to teach and deliver the lesson and how to confirm that you've met the goal. The goal might be, what do I want the students to be able to accomplish at the end of this lesson? I want the students to be able to demonstrate that they can trim the mainsail in a way that keeps it full and keeps the boat moving. Might be the goal of a lesson. So there's this preparatory piece, and you're going to look at the lesson plan and say, what do I need to bring with me to teach the lesson? During the lesson, use the plan as a guide. So it's a guide in a number of different ways. If there's a number of pieces in the plan, then you can use the timing allocations for those pieces to make sure that you're staying on schedule. I know the first time I taught basic cruise, I didn't have lesson plans. I didn't have a curriculum plan. And it was a 4 morning weekends to get through the practical. And at the end of the session, second session, so we're halfway through the course, when I looked at the logbook, I was about 17% of the way through the practical. So if I had had a plan, a curriculum plan, and lesson plans, I would have done a much better job in that first encounter. It made my second weekend pretty exciting because we really had to move quickly to get through the material. So the plan helps you do a lot of things. And for me, the other thing that I kind of get through the teaching component and the skill development component, and then breathe a sigh of relief. And if I haven't thought hard about how I'm going to review the material and how I'm going to evaluate where the students are at the end of the lesson, I sometimes just fall back to some things which aren't as successful as I could be. So the end of plan process in how you're going to evaluate maybe the actual questions you're going to ask, the key components that you intend to remind people about are an important part of the plan. And after the lesson, it's your opportunity to mull over what worked and what didn't. And this is your chance to make a change to the plan. And the only way that we will improve our teaching is by planning, delivering, and then updating the plans to make them better, because we all work on our own. We don't have peers watching us. We don't have experts coaching us. This is, I think, the best way to continually improve what we're doing in the water. So that's my spiel about curriculum planning and lesson planning. And I hope that the guys that asked me to do this are happy with what I said.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
It's Paul, Big Blue Sailing out here on the West Coast.
Yep.
I would love it if Sail Canada had a kind of a generic lesson plan that they could hand out to new instructors, because going from 0 to hero is a pretty long stretch. And wouldn't it be nice to have something generic from Sail Canada that we can sort of follow along and then develop?
I hear what you're saying, and we've had lots of conversations about that. It's our perspective that it's hard to use other people's plans, but be that as it may, it might be a benefit to see a sample for each potential component. In the instructor clinics, what we want to do is develop people's abilities to build plans. And then moving forwards, we really haven't made much progress on giving you a set of plans that you could look at after the clinic. But what we have done is, with the rubrics for basic and intermediate, provided a lot of information on what you need to cover and the skills you need to be looking for. So that leaves you with a smaller task to build a plan. We've had this desire to give candidates a set of lesson plans for years and years. And I started on the process, and I found that I was rewriting every plan because they all had significant shortcomings. So I got to the point where I wasn't making much progress on the target. And I'll say that in the CANSAIL world, so the dinghy training world, they take the same approach we do. They ask candidates to build plans and coach them on how to do it as part of the instructor clinics. They are in the process of building a set of plans that they'll be able to give to instructors once they've finished their clinics. But they're spending a huge chunk of cash on doing that. And Sail Canada has not seen fit, and at the moment doesn't have the budget to do the same thing for cruising. So I will say that as time passes, if we get a bunch of volunteers that want to do some work on building plans, I'd be happy to support that initiative. But we just haven't got there yet. one of the big changes 2 years ago was the certification process and the certification period. So we moved from 3 years to 5 years for everything but the first practical certification or the first certification. And we asked everybody at the end of the 5-year period to come back to a clinic. And there was, to say the least, there was a lot of conversation and resistance to this, but everybody has to do it. The end of the story, I guess, and we're going to take another look at the process, but the end of the story is that the individuals that have come back and participated in a one-day recertification clinic focused on development and not an evaluation have almost unanimously said that that process had value. So these are the components of the recertification process that we aim for. And we talked about these last year, and I will show them again in the next slide in a slightly different format. But the design we've ended up with is a one-day practical clinic plus some homework before and after. And the intention is for us to become better instructors so that we can better serve our clients. That's really the intention. So I skipped over a slide because it seems to be out of sequence. I'm going to move forwards one more and then come back to it. This is the slide that I showed last year when we were talking about recertification. And the reason I've left it up here is because it links to, or it identifies the 3 policy documents that are available on the website. So the square on the right-hand side, cruising instructor certification, those 3 documents, the download documents, are available on the on the website at the bottom of the instructor pages. So if you're not sure about the process and how it works, that would be a resource for you to go to. One last conversation about certification and recertification. We continue to get lots of questions about how do you become a navigation instructor? How do you become a keelboat race instructor? So there are some instructor levels that we award by application. We don't have clinics that get people those levels. Those are the navigation instructor levels. So coastal instructor, which would be teaching basic and intermediate nav, advanced nav instructor, celestial instructor, and then the keelboat race instructor levels. And what we're really looking for is for the person to show us that they're ready to step up and teach the course. That's really the target of this process. So we ask them to submit an application, and then the things they need to do to show they're ready to teach the course, write the exam, the student exams to 90%, prepare a curriculum plan for the standards for identifying how long they intend to teach them, how many sessions, how they're going to break the material up into a logical development phase or process. We ask for lesson plans for the standard, and we ask to see presentation and training support materials. And we're not really prescriptive about what we expect to do. What we're trying to do is provide some coaching and feedback to sequencing and methods of teaching materials to make the delivery of high quality. So think about if you want to do any of these levels, this is really the process we're trying to follow. And with that, I'd be done. So if there are questions or anything for discussion, I'd be happy to entertain them, or for Nick, for that matter. Don't everybody speak at once.
Surely there's got to be some questions.
No, there don't have to be.
Okay, well, while you guys are thinking of questions, I wanted to mention Megan Medlock is also on the call, who I'm sure most of you guys from Ontario know. Failing Jamie or myself for help, Megan is also one of the most helpful people you could ever contact. She is the person at Ontario Sailing who oversees programs. So if you have a Ontario specific question, Megan's your gal for the job. Megan, thank you for being here tonight.
Maybe I can ask Kim a question.
Oh, yeah.
Kim, you were lucky enough to listen to my comments about lesson planning and curriculum planning on the weekend. Did I hit all of the high points?
Yes, you definitely did. Yeah, you definitely did.
Okay.
And sorry, gang, I will support Jamie. I am still a very big believer in that, as much as it would be nice to say, here is, you know, the instructor in a box, set of lesson plans, there are just too many different variables as to how courses get presented across this country, that we need to make sure that we as instructors have the tools to be able to be flexible enough to deal with all the variables that come forward in our world, such as what Jamie mentioned, weather, student interactions, number of students, the type of equipment we've got, breakdowns, all of that type of stuff. And if we don't have proper plans and are comfortable enough with the content of them, I don't think we can react appropriately enough and quickly enough for the benefit and safety of our students.
Great.
But Kim
Thanks.
and Jamie, we're not saying we want completed plans. What we're just saying is some kind of a template to go off. If I wasn't involved in a group right now doing the navigation, I wouldn't have a clue where to start, and I would have given up already.
So you know what, I would be happy to run a session that focused on preparing lesson plans. And that might provide some guidance as to people like Gord, but who haven't had the luxury of working in a group and talked about building plans. It looks pretty daunting when you start looking at what do I do, but in fact the process is relatively straightforward and is not particularly onerous. It just requires a little bit of structured thinking and then a little bit of creativity. So I don't know if we want to spend a half hour on the topic right now, but I would be happy to spend some time talking about how I build lesson plans and how I managed to get through a bunch of them relatively quickly. So if there's some appetite for that, that's something that we could look forward to doing in the near future.
Jamie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Mike Ernst out in British Columbia.
Hi.
I'm the one who's working on the Spinnaker endorsement for
Yeah.
instructors.
Yeah.
I'd be very interested in knowing if any of the people who are attending this session are actually teaching cruising boat Spinnaker work. We currently only have 3 certified instructors in Canada, according to the Sail Canada website. But I have come across a number of courses that have been being run in different provinces. I just would like to hear some comments from the people who are attending. Thank you.
Open the floor to whoever wants to comment.
Well, Jamie, maybe I should pipe up at this time.
Sure.
So I was part of the original creative force that created the standard. And yes, we did not get any materials created at that time. And where I would love to be able to see the evaluation material go for this course would be the development of a workbook similar to that being used at the start keelboat level. And the workbook, of course, could be sort of broken into 2 sections, subject to the equipment that you are providing the course on. And that would be symmetrical or an asymmetrical. I've tried to work with some instructors to help get that material going forward, but I'm one of those unique instructors. I still haven't been able to go out and teach this standard yet, but that's sort of where I would like to see this standard evolve to in development of the evaluation materials.
Well, we know that Diane has at least one Spinnaker clinic or course scheduled for this year at ABYC.
Yes,
And we know that there was an instructor clinic run at Simply Sailing earlier in the spring. And we, in addition to what Mike you generated, we do have the product of the first instructor clinic that was run in BC about 6 or 7 years ago. So we do have some resources to start drawing on, but it's a project that needs some effort and attention, and we will continue to work on it. And I would expect that we really won't have anything that we can talk about until probably the next call. The next year when we do the same kind of update, I would expect that we'll have some materials that we can say they've been published and are available.
Jamie, if I may, thank you very much, Kim, for that input. If anybody is interested in looking at how the standard has been developed, Australian Sailing has got an excellent program worked out with lots of work cards, etc. And if you're looking at lesson planning setup, if you go to them, they do have a number of lesson plans posted. Thank you.
So we have a number of resources for us to put together support material for individuals that want to deliver this kind of training. We just need to organize it and make it accessible, I think. But of course, it's a chunk of effort to do that. Any other comments?
Jamie,
So where we're going, what we're doing?
here's a question for you. And this may not be fair at this time, and maybe I should have asked you on the weekend. What do you see as our newest, biggest hurdle going forward with the system as a whole? And that may be a way too big of a loaded question.
I would say as a system, the two things that we need to work on addressing that are outside of where the, how are the standards built, what kind of support material is there for them, et cetera. There's two things we need to do that are particularly challenging, and challenging in themselves, but also challenging for Sail Canada. And I would say one of those is information and accessibility to students about where they can go to find training. And if you look at the PSA websites or the Sail Canada websites, they have schools listed. They're not organized. There's no references to what training they're actually running. And on many of the websites, the cruising and dinghy schools are all mixed up. So you can go to the BC Sailing website, for example, go to the cruising schools section, look for schools where training is available, and the first two that are presented are the YMCA and a Can Sail Dinghy School. So that there's a real, we have not yet taken advantage of one of the things we really should make easier for potential clients, and that is one huge challenge, I believe. And the second, I would say, would be there are some things that we do that positively differentiate us from the other organizations that deliver on-water training programs in Canada and the US. And we have not done a very good job of marketing and explaining those to our customers or our potential customers, and telling people why they should come to us instead of going elsewhere. So I would say they're totally uninvolved with many of the things we've talked about at this session, but those, I think, are two key challenges that we need to look at addressing.
Thank you.
I agree with those two observations totally. Thank you.
So it's not that it's not that we haven't had conversations about them. We're not aware, it's not that we're not unaware of them. The question is how we will manage to dedicate some resources to move forwards on them. So,
It seems okay. There's a fresh one in there.
so any other questions that I might be able to comment on or answer, or Nick could respond to?
Actually, Nick, Jamie, there's a great question in the chat.
Sure.
Um,
There's a bunch of stuff in the chat, isn't there?
I was just about to respond to it, but I'll answer this way, Dejan. So Dejan's question was, in the past, advanced cruising has sorry, I should just read the question instead of trying to reword it. Apparently there wasn't much interest in advanced cruising standard among students in the past, very disproportional to basic and intermediate. Do we see any change in this stat? So the answer is no. SKS and basic are still the largest volume of cruising that we do. But I haven't run that stat, focused on that stat to see if there is any kind of trend that we can notice. So I'll take a look at that, Dejan, and see what the difference is.
So a couple of CEOs ago, we had some conversations about how the advanced standard was positioned, just in terms of its perspective and view in the market, and a conversation about how we might change that. But we never were able to move forwards on it. So there's really a conversation that we could be having when we get the attention of some of our students about the value of advanced, and it's really as much an issue of advanced sail trim and making the boat go better and sail more efficiently, and a bunch of things in that area, and an introduction to passage making and long distance sailing that might make the level more attractive. The new CEO is very interested in offshore racing, and if he wants to move on that interest and incorporate some offshore keelboat racing pieces into our suite of training, then the advanced level would be a key lead to that kind of offering. So that might move the goalpost a little bit, and might move how there could be some resources available to look at marketing or attracting individuals to the standard. But at this point, we see these significant declines in the number of students from basic to intermediate, and the same decline from intermediate to advanced. So it's just a numbers game. But there are schools that every year run one or two advanced programs in the Caribbean. So it's not that they're not happening at all. It's just that there's not a lot of them.
Another question from Jeff Cassidy, which was that Sail Canada used to release stats on participation numbers year over year. So we sort of changed our format, which was from a very Excel spreadsheet based format to a bit more of a visual format, which definitely had a bit less detail. What we've had really big success in terms of reporting, in terms of gaining reports, would be through CheckClick. So as you all know, CheckClick, the online evaluation system, is a requirement of a Sail Canada school to submit their participation numbers. We're finding that is fairly well adhered to, but there still are a lot of schools that are not using CheckClick. So if there's any of those schools on the call tonight, I would encourage you to give me a call so that we can help get you on board with CheckClick and get you properly reporting your participation numbers, so that the reports that we can pull from CheckClick are as accurate as possible. Dominic, the owner of CheckClick, and I have been on a little bit of a national tour. Some of you may have seen us at the BC summit, and then at the Quebec fall summit as well. And we had great response from everyone there who was just sort of interested in learning more about what CheckClick is and how to get signed up. So if you're still not using CheckClick, please contact me, or if you want to do a little reading on your own, the Getting Started guide is on our website. And by ensuring that everyone's properly reporting their participation, we can really easily produce some really incredible reports that show all the stats that we would want to show year over year.
I would say that the metrics from CheckClick are challenged in at least one way, and we would love to be able to look at instructor activity in CheckClick, but the way that it's set up at the moment, the individual that does the data entry is the one that's tagged to award of a certification or to a student for that matter. And that's often a school administrator. So we're expecting a change coming in 2025 that will ensure that the evaluating instructor is also identified as part of the CheckClick entry. We're hoping that will happen anyway. And that would really be useful in terms of looking at the metrics on instructor activity and provide us some key information on who we should be reaching out to do some additional training and what kinds of groups we might look for instructors in. Many of the schools struggle to find an instructor base and a group of individuals that they are happy to use and comfortable with their competence. So anything we can do to add to the instructor base is a good thing for the entire world. I should say for the SAIL Canada world, perhaps.
For the entire world, Jamie, you're right.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
One of the big pushes that came out of the IE clinic was almost a unilateral support of the IEs sitting around the table about now also trying to get the instructors' standards to being recorded into CheckClick as well. And Megan, don't worry, we realize that yes, there is a financial impact on this one at a provincial level, but we think we've got some answers for that. So hopefully maybe we will also to be able to start, the IEs would like to see that coming forward in CheckClick as well. So
Kim, you're saying for instructor clinics, you'd like to see that flow through CheckClick.
yeah, like the like basic cruising instructor get into CheckClick as well. Yes.
Instructor levels and recertifications.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, at least for the initial instructor levels, the cost of the clinics keeps escalating because the cost of everything does, so that the CheckClick piece becomes less and less of an issue, just in relation to the overall cost of the process. But the barrier has just been the PSAs have been reluctant to embrace that concept. So I think there's some internal marketing we may need to do to get there, but worth the conversation. Well, if there's no other questions or comments, I think we can stop the recording and end our session. Like a new message.